Hello, my name is James Turner and I am a senior solicitor at Laurent Law, Barristers and Solicitors, located in Grey Lynn, Auckland, New Zealand. In recent times we have had discussions with clients about New Zealand citizenship. In this video I would like to speak a bit about New Zealand citizenship with reference to some of the questions that we have been asked by clients and related issues that have been raised. Visa applications in New Zealand are decided by Immigration New Zealand, which is part of the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment. Applications for New Zealand citizenship are decided by the Department of Internal Affairs, which is separate to Immigration New Zealand. Applications for visas are decided under the Immigration Act 2009, but there are different criteria to meet for the grant of New Zealand citizenship as set out in the Citizenship Act 1977. The key requirements for the grant of New Zealand citizenship are set out in Section 8 of the Citizenship Act 1977. These are that you have held residence in New Zealand for at least 5 years, that you have spent at least 240 days in New Zealand during each of the 5 years, and a total of at least 1,350 days in New Zealand across the 5 years, and that you intend to keep living in New Zealand. That you are able to hold a basic conversation in English, and that you are of good character. Some types of criminal conviction mean it is unlikely you will be granted citizenship. For example, a person sentenced to a term of imprisonment of 5 years or more will usually not be granted citizenship. Exceptions to these requirements are rarely allowed. Under Section 9 of the Citizenship Act 1977, the Minister of Internal Affairs, not the Minister of Immigration, can grant citizenship as a special case. However, exceptional circumstances are required. When you acquire New Zealand citizenship, you take on the privileges and responsibilities of being a New Zealand citizen. Acquiring New Zealand citizenship involves making a commitment to New Zealand. We have been approached by clients with character problems, for example, such as a criminal conviction, which require a submission to be provided as to why citizenship should be granted despite the character issue. Now, New Zealand citizenship can also be acquired by birth, for example, by being born in New Zealand and at least one parent is a New Zealand citizen, and can also be acquired by descent, for example, by being born outside New Zealand and at least one parent is a New Zealand citizen, except by descent. We have been asked about obtaining New Zealand citizenship by descent, where the person wanting to apply for citizenship by descent was born prior to the Citizenship Act 1977. This brings to relevance the British Nationality and New Zealand Citizenship Act 1948, which is a repealed piece of law in New Zealand that the Citizenship Act 1977 replaced. This British Nationality and New Zealand Citizenship Act 1948 forms part of New Zealand's immigration history. As the title suggests, there was a time in New Zealand when a large number of migrants to New Zealand were from the UK. Immigration laws in New Zealand have changed over time. Now, both a permanent residence visa and New Zealand citizenship allow the holder to live in New Zealand permanently. The key advantage of being a New Zealand citizen for most people is the ability to hold a New Zealand passport. There are certain other things you need to be a New Zealand citizen to do, such as stand for the New Zealand Parliament or local government and represent New Zealand at the Olympic Games. There is also an ability for New Zealand citizens to live as residents in Australia under an agreement between New Zealand and Australia. This is an advantage of being a New Zealand citizen, which is popular for many people. We sometimes get asked about the ability of New Zealand citizens or other New Zealand visa holders to live in Australia. However, we are not licensed to provide immigration advice for Australia, nor are we lawyers admitted in Australia. So we cannot provide immigration advice for Australia, but we may be able to refer you to someone who can. We also want to say that it is important to remember that despite comparisons often being drawn between Australia and New Zealand in news media in New Zealand, usually in favour of Australia, New Zealand is a great country to live in too. There are some differences between the two countries which are significant for many people. And it is relevant to remember that New Zealand does have a much smaller population compared to Australia, which may explain some of the differences. Interesting to note is that over time there have been some controversial stories and reports about very wealthy US citizens obtaining New Zealand citizenship through possibly questionable methods. such as lobbying members of the New Zealand government and public servants. For example, the case of Peter Thiel, who was granted New Zealand citizenship in 2011. While several years ago now, the case of Peter Thiel was very controversial and politically sensitive when it broke in news media due to his connections to Donald Trump and the Republican Party in the United States. I suspect the current government would very much want to avoid such media reports being repeated. The case of Peter Thiel does show, however, that New Zealand citizenship can be something that is very highly valued and prized indeed. Thank you for listening to my video regarding New Zealand citizenship. Please feel welcome to contact us here at Laurent Law if you have any questions about New Zealand citizenship or any other questions relating to New Zealand immigration. I wish you all the best.